Oh my gosh, well, what a great story we have today. This is so fascinating. Nicaragua, we've as a ministry, we've always been focused overseas, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And we've always looked at Central America as saying there's some stuff going on, or South America, there's some stuff going on, and we've always held off. But with what's happened in Nicaragua over the last couple of years, and now it's really heating up, we're jumping in, and I can't tell you how excited I am for you to get to know this brother right here. It's John Britt Hancock. He goes by Britt. His ministry is Mountain Gateway. He has more than a decade in Nicaragua. Fascinating history. And Britt, welcome. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much, brother. It's an honor and a joy to be here.
Absolutely. We were just praying beforehand, and oh my gosh, my heart is moved because what he's going through is just the way of the kingdom and in battle with the world. So we're going to unpack this for you. It's going to be a fascinating ride. So Britt, just kind of top level stuff. Give us kind of a history of the ministry. What the heck were you doing down in Nicaragua, and what got you into trouble? And just again, we'll go high level here.
Okay, sure. Been a pioneer church planting missionary since 1996. Worked mostly in Mexico all these years, and then in 2013 we expanded into Nicaragua to begin to work in small marginalized villages there. And so the first person that we prayed with to get saved got saved in June of 2013, and then we've been working there ever since.
And the ministry and you were doing all kinds of stuff. You were doing gospel work, but you're also doing work with orphans, with kids, drug addicts, the usual, just the work of the gospel among the poor, among just the people, and really serving the country. And I'm going to echo back to you, and you tell me if I'm off anywhere, but the ministry just kind of grew and grew in prominence, and there was favor from the government because of all the good work you guys were doing. Is that fair?
That's fair to say. Our work with children and drug addicts, that's in Mexico,
Okay.
Not in Nicaragua. But our work grew in Nicaragua. We expanded into more and more villages, and then in 2020, a double Category 4 hurricane, two Category 4 hurricanes hit Nicaragua in exactly the same spot 13 days apart. It was the worst natural disaster that had ever struck rural Nicaragua and Honduras. So we responded in a substantive way.
Yeah.
And that won us a lot of favor with the government. I had previously been, I preached to Congress and done some other things, so they knew who we were.
The Congress of Nicaragua.
The Congress of Nicaragua, yeah. And we were not perceived as a threat, and they were convinced we were there, helping the people. We were over time able to save thousands of families from natural disasters.
Yeah.
And then we got a coffee farm in 2017 and began with fair wage, fair labor, fair trade practices. And we have a coffee farm in the U.S. that's connected with that. And so we had an expanding footprint, training up rural national church leaders and that kind of thing.
Wonderful. And then was it around 20 when you started the Crusades, or did that come later? Tell me about those.
No, the Lord spoke to me in 2022, in late 2022, to see if we could do a mass evangelism campaign in every region of the country. So we obtained permission from the government, and then to do 20 mass evangelism campaigns in 2023 and 2024. We did 8 campaigns in 2023, the last one ending this last November, a couple months ago. We partnered with Nathan Morris of Shake the Nations Ministries. They do crusades. I never had done a crusade before this, but we did all of the logistics. We built the team that that sort of organized the whole thing. And then, I mean, I was on the platform also preaching
Yeah.
and those kinds of things, but that was Evangelist Nathan's purview more than mine, although we did it together.
But
Um,
you and the believers on the ground were the driving force, and he was an
Correct.
evangelist you brought in.
The Lord helped
Yeah.
us really unify 6,000 churches in Nicaragua. We
Wow.
had every
Wow.
major denomination
Wow.
and independent church network, and we were digging up pastors that maybe had 15 or 20 people in their church that no one really knew existed, and they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
people just came out of the woodwork. We had almost 1/6 the population attend to those 8 campaigns that we did. It was right at 1 million people, so it's not quite a six because there's like 6.5 million people in the country.
Yeah.
But basically, brother, every space that we contrived to hold the meeting, God filled it up with this massive
Hungry
explosion
people.
of desperate
Yes.
people,
Desperate, hungry
thousands,
people.
tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And we had thousands of volunteers working. And then, kind of what got us in trouble, I guess,
I
they
think I
didn't,
know what got you in trouble, by the
yeah,
way.
they
I think
didn't,
you just explained
yeah, they didn't like it, but
it.
they granted the National Plaza in Managua for us to hold. It's the biggest meeting space in the country because they were happy watching. This was calming everybody from what had
Yeah.
happened in 2018 and
There was just a
kind of
lot of
being,
political unrest. There was a lot of uprising that was making it dangerous for the government. So they saw this and said, but this is peaceful and it can blow off steam, I'm guessing, from their point of view. So they allow it to
actually,
happen.
yeah, exactly. Actually, they expressed verbally
Yeah.
to us
Yes.
through kind of back channels that they had hope that the power of the gospel could work peace and healing
Yeah.
for the wounds of 2018 that
And keep
happened
them
when
in
they
power. They
and
were hoping
yeah,
the gospel
exactly.
could keep them in power.
It's
That's
true.
weird.
And so when we did it just exploded.
Yeah.
They gave us the National Plaza in Managua, the largest meeting space in the country. We had over 200,000 people cram into the plaza and then up the
Mm,
boulevard.
mm.
The government ran their drone over it. They were measuring the crowds, however you do that. I don't, there's methods, but we're not really publishing numbers, but for sure there were over 200,000 people the second
Massive.
night. It was 125 to 150,000 people the first night and over 200,000 the second night. And we had hundreds of thousands of people, multitudes responding to the call to meet Jesus, and tens
Mm.
of thousands of people were miraculously healed. We had people healed in mass. People were leaving hospitals. Every class of miracle almost that you can find in the Bible
Yeah.
was happening. It was
Yeah. Yeah.
extraordinary. God really shook the entire country.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Praise God.
One month after the Managua campaign, they began to arrest our people. They
Yeah.
seized all of our assets, 47 vehicles, four pieces of real estate, our coffee farm. Um, they put 11 of our personnel in prison, our
Yes.
ministry team and leaders. They put our 2 lawyers, independent
Yes.
lawyers, in prison, and
Yep.
they revoked our license, just like they did the Red Cross
Yes.
and over 3,500 other nonprofit organizations, many of them evangelical. They've kicked out, seized their property, and personnel and people associated with them have been imprisoned or disappeared or run off since 2018, but most
Yeah.
poignantly so in the last 2 years.
And many brothers in the Catholic Church, many priests, many bishops, they've
Oh
had
yeah,
this.
they fought
Yeah.
it. They kind of been fighting a war with the Catholic Church. They severed
Yes.
diplomatic ties with the Vatican in February, and the Vatican closed down their embassy in February, and then they had a bunch of Catholic priests in prison, and they just exiled those Catholic priests to the Vatican about 3 weeks ago. And it kind of started with um, Bishop Alvarez, he was drawing attention to the human rights violations, during the 2018 thing,
Yeah.
and they arrested him and tried him for treason and found him guilty.
Yeah.
But then, there were people that worked really hard for him, and then they got him and 15 other Catholic priests released that were imprisoned with him because of his
Yeah.
situation.
Okay. Well, thank you for that explanation. I already used the punchline, but again, I'm just scratching my head trying to figure out how you got in trouble, but we're going to get to the bottom of this. And brother, I can't tell you, like I said, we were praying beforehand and we were unpacking a little. And for the audience, I was just talking to Britt because it's so hard. I mean, there's the work, there's so many years of hard work and so much success. And then this, and it can feel so defeating. And I was just saying to this brother, just keep your head high because this response is what's supposed to happen. It's because of the effectiveness. It's because the gospel's going out. And I can tell you historically, this is the way it works. Are you familiar at any level with, the history of Korea?
Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds,
Yeah.
yeah, I've talked about this a lot because of massive, there's actually centuries of the gospel seeping in. And then there's the explosion of the gospel, one of the greatest revivals. And then what happens?
Yep.
I think the first one was the Japanese came in. The Japanese came in and took over. And the Japanese had a god, so they didn't need competition. And then what happens after that? World War II. And then you have the Marxist takeover, and then it goes hyper. But this is the way. And the only thing I could say is we don't know the Lord's timing, but we know his heart and his bride. Apparently, he really fancies Nicaragua, and his bride is there, and he'll have her. So it's kind of like someone says,
well,
go ahead.
Yeah, and I thank you for your encouragement. And there is a move of God that really started in 2023, and they can't stop that.
Yes.
I know,
Yeah.
God literally shook the entire nation, and I'm satisfied that it's continuing.
Yes.
Our people say that the church is encouraged and unified and sort of not duped. They understand all the charges are bogus, and
yeah.
They're trying to get us to plead guilty and all the things that they do, which we're not going to do. I'm indicted, and my son and my daughter-in-law are indicted, and we're going to be tried in absentia.
Yeah, of course. Well, you're criminals, so what can you do? They got to come after you,
Yes, we're charged for money laundering.
Well, who knows what other nefarious activities you've been involved in, but I'm sure we can come up with lots of stuff. Yes. And just again on the historical, then much closer to home, I'm sure you're familiar with the history of Cuba and the revival that broke out there, and again, so I won't go into it, but so I used to go to Cuba a lot, and I finally was talking to some higher up Christians, and they kind of unpacked. They got someone to give me the whole spiritual history and what happened. Is fascinating. Wow. Because the Marxists come into power, and of course, first they're like, we're friends, we're no threat, we're going to build utopia. What happens when they get power? So Marxism can't exist except with a gun, with a bayonet, and with a rope. That's the only way, because it's a system that's unsustainable, and it's always run by mafia. But anyways, so they came in, they arrested, they killed, they imprisoned 30 years, and then it's an amazing, amazing story, the move of God, the revival that happened. So we haven't seen the end of this. This revival was attacked, but it's moving, and nothing will stop it. And from history, we talked about Iran. It's almost, and these guys never learn. The dictators never learn. The more you press down, what happens when you press something? It spreads out.
Yeah, the church thrives under persecution historically everywhere that is happening in the world and has happened throughout history, beginning in Jerusalem. It was the impetus to spread the gospel.
Amen. So Ortega and the Marxists, if they had half a brain, they would have made Christianity mandatory in their country. If they want to shut it down, you make it mandatory and put Bibles everywhere, and that'll be the end of it. But when you press and when you oppress, and especially when there's a movement like this happening.
Well,
This is, yeah,
there's a lot of evangelicals in Nicaragua, I don't know, over 30% or maybe 35%. So they're not hostile to evangelical Christianity.
yeah,
What seemingly what they don't like though is um, such a massive unified movement.
always. That's the thing. If they're a mafia, people have to understand that it's a mafia running a country, and they can only do it with guns and bullets and blades. And so anytime you see a consolidation of potential power, even though you guys are no threat, there is no threat. You have no political ambitions. Your guys are about the gospel.
Yeah,
But this is the way.
I can tell you that, and I know a lot. I've had meetings literally with thousands of pastors and church leaders,
Yeah,
and I've talked to hundreds of pastors this last year directly, and every one of them there's a pervasive attitude and understanding in the country that they have to watch what they say.
of course.
They know they're being surveilled.
Yep.
They told me stories, and I know people that have been imprisoned for saying the wrong thing from the platform, praying the wrong way. And that's been accelerated now in the last few years.
Yeah.
And even when there's no one around, they sort of kind of look around and drop their
Sure.
voice, and because they don't know who's listening with what listening device. I mean, that's the idea
Yes.
that they have. And now, because of what's happened with us, I can say, yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't doubt them at all before, and we had to be uber careful.
You bet. That's why you had those massive crusades.
Yeah, we stayed away from politics and stayed in the
Yeah.
gospel only.
Yes. But yeah,
And
it can't stand when they see the power of the gospel and they see how desperate the people are. And I'm sure they even thought the evangelicals would be a counterweight to the Catholic Church. But when they see everyone unified and, oh my
oh
gosh,
yeah,
that's a disaster.
they actually clamped down on the Catholics and refused to allow them to do their normal yearly things that they do in the streets. They told them inside your churches only. The Catholics were upset with us because we're holding these massive evangelical open air campaigns, and the government said, yeah, you guys aren't making peace, they're making peace, and so they get favor right now, and we don't like you. And so
Yeah.
they were sort of, I don't know. I mean, you can read that however you want to read it,
Yeah.
but they were definitely using us to gouge the Catholics
Yes.
for a little while last year.
Yep.
And then, as a matter of fact, we were suspect to some of the news agencies that understand Nicaragua's history and behavior in the last few years, and they were going like, you guys are in bed with the Sandinistas. You have to be communist yourself. And
Yes. How could this be happening? Yes.
Breitbart News has done a couple of articles on this, and I spoke with
Were
they
they
did one
disparaging
without.
articles, by the way?
Well, the first one was. The second one, you can go look at it. It's very favorable because I spent an hour and a half talking to the
Yes.
reporter who has family in Cuba,
Yes.
and she was watching all of these meetings all year, and she told her
Yes.
colleagues, she was like, they're either communist or they're all about to go to prison.
Yeah. Which one was it?
Yeah.
It was the latter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then she didn't understand how we could get the
Yes.
green light so robustly, and I explained that to
Yes.
her.
No. And then, yeah. So the first one was fired off an article without doing the research. Then she did the research. Is like, oh, okay. And then, yeah, once everything is shut down, then it's all very clear.